Sometimes the most important decisions we make are the quiet ones nobody notices. They are the moments when we choose compassion over convenience, patience over frustration, and service over self-interest. Welcome to the Listening Heart, folks. At its core, leadership integrates how we think, act, and live in our daily lives. And from a scriptural and values-driven perspective, spiritual leadership is the practice of leading from within, guided by wisdom, faith, values, and a higher purpose. And remember, although this podcast concentrates on spiritual leadership, we are all called to lead in some way, no matter our purpose in life. Hello, folks. I'm Richard Fontanie, and I will be your host today. And we'll explore the joy of service, decisions to put others first with love and hope. Now, if you're new to this podcast, welcome. And if you're returning, a heartfelt welcome back. And before we begin, I invite each of you to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And thank you for doing so. Now, one of the greatest misconceptions about leadership is the belief that leadership is mainly about power, visibility, and authority. Yet, throughout scriptures and human history, the leaders who leave the deepest impact are those who quietly serve others with humility and compassion. And Jesus demonstrated this powerfully in the Gospel of John by washing the feet of his disciples. In the Christian tradition, the Son of God chose to take on the role of a servant, and that single act challenged traditional ideas about influence, greatness, and success. In Matthew chapter 20, Jesus taught, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant." And that teaching still speaks directly into our homes, workplaces, businesses, and communities today. The joy of service begins with a decision. It is the decision to place human dignity ahead of ego. It is a decision to listen before reacting. And it is a decision to encourage rather than criticize. And often, it is a decision to bring hope into difficult situations. In leadership, those decisions matter deeply, especially when we apply them to our everyday lives. A manager who takes time to mentor a struggling employee demonstrates service. A parent who patiently guides a child through disappointment demonstrates service. An entrepreneur who honestly helps customers rather than simply chasing profits demonstrates service. These moments may appear small, but they shape culture, trust, and relationships over time. Now, the Old Testament also offers remarkable examples of servant leadership. Consider the story of Nehemiah, when he learned that Jerusalem walls remained broken. He did not respond with blame or avoidance. He prayed, he reflected, and then he stepped forward to serve. Nehemiah organized people, encouraged workers who were discouraged, solved problems, and remained focused on those who needed it, despite opposition. And this leadership was grounded in purpose and responsibility. He understood that leadership was not about personal recognition. It was about helping others respond to hope. And that lesson remains relevant today. Many people are quietly carrying emotional burdens, workplace stress, financial uncertainty, And servant leadership reminds us that our words and actions can either increase discouragement or strengthen hope. One CEO I encountered demonstrated this beautifully. During COVID-19, a tumultuous economic period for most organizations, when several employees feared losing their jobs, this agency was no different. Now, instead of avoiding a difficult conversation, the CEO convened the leadership team for an honest discussion. He explained the financial challenges clearly. He invited suggestions. He asked how the company could move forward together. And that meeting changed the atmosphere completely. Employees felt respected, and the agency survived not simply because of strategy, but because trust grew stronger during uncertainty. Service builds trust. Trust strengthens leadership. The Apostle Paul emphasized this principle repeatedly in Paul's exhortation to the Philippians. He urged them to preserve unity in humility. In chapter 2, he encouraged believers to look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. And this teaching reflects a universal value found in many cultures and traditions. Healthy communities flourish when people care for one another. Workplaces improve when leaders value people. And families grow stronger when individuals choose understanding instead of selfishness. Now, serving others does not mean becoming weak or allowing unhealthy behavior. Healthy service includes wisdom, accountability, boundaries, and courage. And Jesus himself demonstrated compassion while also speaking truth. Spiritual leadership requires both kindness and truth. One of the most practical ways to serve others today is through attentive listening. And many people feel unheard. In a noisy digital culture filled with constant distractions, genuine listening has become increasingly rare. And when we listen carefully, we convey dignity. We tell others that their experiences matter. A leader who listens creates emotional safety. A spouse who listens strengthens intimacy. A friend who listens offers healing. And sometimes the most meaningful service that we can provide is simply our presence. Caregivers understand this. I know of many caregivers who find that just sitting with someone is the best service that they can offer. I have often heard that someone who is having a difficult time is not necessarily the one who offers polished advice. Instead, it was an individual who quietly sat next to them, listened carefully, and allowed them to speak honestly about their hurts or their pain. Service often begins with compassion and not solutions. Now, that principle applies in leadership as well. Before rushing to solve problems, wise leaders first seek understanding. They create space for conversation. They invite perspectives. They demonstrate respect. And in doing so, they strengthen relationships that support long-term success. Now, service also brings about personal transformation. When we focus entirely on ourselves, anxiety and frustration often rise. But when we contribute to others with love and purpose, we often find renewed meaning and joy. And this is one reason volunteerism, mentoring, coaching, and caregiving can be deeply fulfilling experiences. Serving others reminds us that life is larger than our personal ambitions. In Galatians chapter 5, Paul wrote, "Serve one another humbly in love." And notice the connection between humility and love here. Humility allows us to recognize that every person carries value, and love becomes a behavior that moves us toward action. And together they create the foundation for spiritual leadership. So how can we practice servant leadership this week? Well, first, pause before making important decisions and ask, who will be affected by this choice? Second, look for one practical opportunity each day to encourage or assist another person. Third, listen more intentionally during conversations. And fourth, express gratitude openly. Fifth, each morning pray and reflect quietly about compassion. Small decisions repeated consistently really allows us to influence others. Remember, leadership is rarely shaped in dramatic moments alone. More often it's shaped in ordinary and daily choices. The decision to remain patient, the decision to tell the truth, the decision to support someone who is struggling, the decision to bring hope instead of negativity. Those are the moments that define servant leadership. Now, before we close today, I invite you to reflect on several questions. Who in your life may need encouragement right now? Where can you replace frustration with understanding? What decisions could help you lead more compassionately at home, at work, or in your community? And how might service bring greater meaning into your own life? Now take a moment this week to reflect, pray, and align with your heart. If this conversation resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and refer to a friend. And thank you for doing so. I'm Richard Fontanie, signing off. Stay tuned next week as our conversation turns to seeking God's wisdom in leadership. I hope you can join me. Bye for now.